All right. Well, welcome to another episode of Beyond ERP, where we delve into the depths in enterprise resource planning and beyond. Today, we're exploring the invaluable lessons learned from ERP implementation and post-go-live support. We'll also touch upon the third-party apps that Essex utilizes, along with the emerging trends in manufacturing and how NetSuite keeps businesses ahead in the game. Today, we have our guest, Grace Longwell, Director of Operations and Planning at Essex, finishing where she oversees all operational aspects of the company. Before her position, she served as a functional consultant at NetSuite, and with her diverse background and hands-on experience, Grace is a valuable asset to the Beyond ERP podcast. Grace, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Yes, definitely. Welcome. So, let's just dive in for our audience. How about that? First, a question. Let's talk about, in your experience, what are some key lessons learned from ERP, your implementation, and post-go-live support?
Yeah, I think working in implementation for a couple of years really helped me get a super strong foundation in NetSuite and also in some of those core tenets that can help companies be really successful with NetSuite right out of the gate. The two biggest things that come to mind are really honing in on master data, as well as getting members of your team involved really from day one. Some of the most successful implementations I got to work on while I was at NetSuite, had a really large end user team that was present. And so we would be able to hear all those different perspectives from people who are really going to be using NetSuite every day and some of the problems that they're looking to solve. Another aspect of really successful implementations is the one that focus on that foundational master data. A lot of customers want to just breeze right through it and say, oh, we'll give you a couple customers and we'll handle the rest later. But taking that time, usually at the front end of the implementation, and getting all your data in and making sure it's clean really ensures that we have sufficient examples to use throughout the implementation. And that helps not only the end user's understanding of the system, but also so that we can test all different examples and make sure that it's set up for success.
Yeah, and you mentioned involving your team from day one. That a lot of people probably don't do that or think that's important. Could you elaborate a little bit on how that impacted the success of implementations you've been involved with in the past?
Yeah, I mean, a NetSuite implementation is a really large time commitment. And as, functional consultants, and then now being on the other side, being a user, I understand that very well. There were a lot of implementations that were led by really just a single person who maybe brought people in for UAT and then brought in people as end users. And those are the ones where you see a lot of fire drills post go live, and you see a lot of kind of under configured and under kind of scoped out aspects of the implementation. We don't expect someone who's, an AR specialist or an AP specialist to be able to put 10 hours a week into a NetSuite implementation. We understand this is, not their full-time job, but to pull different end users to the sessions that make sense for them and to start to involve them early so that they have time to get comfortable with the idea of switching to NetSuite and kind of can pop in and out throughout the implementation and see how the system's getting set up. I've seen that be really successful over the course of an implementation. And then it's a lot less jarring for the users when they show up to work on a Monday and now we're working on NetSuite. They've seen this now over the course of a couple months. They've maybe had some inputs and we're able to see a lot more success in a shorter time with those teams.
Yeah, and we often, I think I'd like to, I enjoy the moments where the lights go off in those personalization sessions where maybe an AP specialist, as an example, starts to get how the whole organization actually runs, because oftentimes they're not privy to the daily intricacies. You highlighted the importance of real transaction exceptions, examples during user acceptance testing. How do these complex scenarios really help in the testing system effectively? And what are some of the risks of overlooking them?
Yeah, I think user acceptance testing, it happens right before go live. It's usually a time where the team who's been working on implementation is probably ready for the project to be over, is really excited for what's to come. And a lot of people try to breeze past it and just say, okay, I have to enter a sales order. I'm going to enter a one-line sales order of my most popular item. And if that looks good, I'll assume that it's going to work for me starting day one post go live. And as you can imagine, that does not really cover the gamut for most companies of what their, more complex examples look like, or, how does your sales order PDF look if you have 10 line items and it has to go on to 2 and 3 pages. These are the things that if we ask for 5 or 10 examples of sales orders, we'll start to dig into, what are those more complex examples? What are those exceptions that come up that you need to know how to manage? And you'll hear me talk a lot about post-go-live fire drills. That's something I dealt with a lot as a NetSuite consultant working in implementation. We would do a 2 to 3 month post-go-live period with our clients. So to get those frantic, midnight emails or 6 a.m. emails saying, I can't get my customer an invoice that works, that's not good for anyone. So to put that emphasis on user acceptance testing and really emphasize, let's test a couple different scenarios. Let's show this to a couple different people, get approval on the PDF from sales, get approval from accounting, get approval from an executive, and really make sure that we're not being asked to make last minute changes about things that could be addressed earlier. Because fire drills are inevitable to an extent when you're switching systems. There's going to be things you overlook, but if we try to get ahead of some of them, it leaves a lot more space for everyone to handle the ones that do come up.
Yeah, and I guess, Grace, being privy to so many different scenarios, maybe could you share with the audience just a couple of examples of maybe, without naming names, some scenarios where there was more neglect than not, and how that maybe hindered the effectiveness of really the ERP system, NetSuite in particular?
Yeah, I can tell you, working on Essex's implementation, obviously now I'm working full-time at Essex, so I've had, about a year with Essex to be able to see these things in more detail. But one thing that we weren't, set up to, or really, set up ahead of time before go live, was to get our list of colors established in NetSuite. So we do wood finishing. So pretty much every order is you take a raw material, you take a color, and it makes a custom finished good. So without having that color list fully fleshed out, the team who worked on our implementation had the time to set up like the top 20 colors. So that, really established the majority of orders. But there was a gap, and even in those first couple days being on NetSuite, and I was actually on site at Essex at the time, we started to get orders in that were for other colors or for custom scenarios, and we had to constantly shuffle to be able to get sales orders churned out and get them sent out to the customers. These are people looking for turnaround within a day or two, so there was a lot of pressure to get a system solution that was going to really get, NetSuite to be able to track this color data, because it's also something we're really interested in reporting on, but also to be able to present it to the customers in a way that would make sense to them and be able to follow this order, through its life cycle.
Yeah, and in that vein, could you also share, jumping back a little bit, on who is Essex, what do you guys do, and I think what would be interesting for our audience is, why did you ultimately elect to work with NetSuite as an ERP application?
Yeah, so Essex is a wood finishing company based in Avenel, New Jersey. So they selected NetSuite really just to bring everything into one place. Previously, they had been operating out of QuickBooks, Dropbox, and a couple of other, Google Sheets, a number of different applications to really achieve, what is really a super customized manufacturing business. Every job, every customer has their own kind of custom requirements. So streamlining, is very difficult. And NetSuite, I think, provided the best opportunity for Essex to, set up some standard operating procedures and, standardize across multiple different sales channels. And really allow everything to be centralized. And Louis, you mentioned before, that aha moment that you see certain end users have during implementation. And there was a lot of that with Essex in terms of letting people know that everything would be in one place. We would be able to see inventory, we'd be able to see colors, we'd be able to see financials and production data all on NetSuite. And those wouldn't be in 4 or 5 different places. So that was, I think, the biggest contribution to Essex selecting NetSuite.
Yeah, and in that vein, kind of last question before I talk too much. CPQ, very kind of unique, relatively new to the NetSuite ecosystem. Essex being at the forefront from adopting CPQ. What are some of the features that you love? How are you all utilizing CPQ within the organization today, beyond just the colors as an example?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, the majority of the work we do is custom. So CPQ was completely integral to our sales order process, and it continues to be the interface for about 80% of our order entry. So for those who aren't familiar with CPQ, basically sets you up with the opportunity to choose different options within a sales order and then create the finished good item that actually lives on the sales order. So for us doing primarily custom manufacturing, when our customer service team launches the configurator, the CPQ off the sales order, they can filter down through all of our different raw materials based on the different specifications the customers have provided. And then they're left with a short list of raw materials that actually meets the criteria for the order. And then they select, we want this color, maybe we want some additional options, and this is the unit price. And then what CPQ is able to do and what's been so helpful for us is that it will create that finished good item. It will create the bill of materials that links it to the raw material. It will create the routing that sends it through our shop and really puts everything onto our work order traveler. And it will create those advanced manufacturing records that we need to populate our tablets out on our production floor. And it does all of that within about 10 to 15 seconds. So while it was a ton of work to set up and to create the master data that operates behind it, and we're still working on it almost every week with new, little things that we uncover and new things we want to change, the flexibility and the kind of technical aspects that are able to map and create so many different related records has been really integral to us, because the alternative for us would have been setting up every possible combination among our raw materials and colors and hoping that that covers everything. And anytime we had a new color or a new material, that would require additional item setup. So to take out that variable for us has been huge.
Interesting. This is great. So let's shift gears a little bit into emerging trends, Grace, in manufacturing. Could you how do you see NetSuite enabling businesses to adapt to rising costs and managing their expenses effectively?
Yeah, I think we're all living in a world where things are getting more expensive by the day. And that's, no different for businesses and manufacturing companies who are tracking labor cost, material cost, non-inventory material costs as well. The ability that NetSuite gives us to segment things in multiple different ways. So to cut by product line, of which we have a few, to also look by all the different kind of expense accounts we've set up that are directly related to some of our vendors that we buy from. Once again, to have those, bills and purchase orders that we enter just constantly feed this data, and it not to require cleanup or kind of extra maintenance before reporting on it has been really great. That when we run our income statement at the end of the month, those expenses, payroll, raw materials is sitting there ready for us to look at. We pull that into Excel, which is another great feature of NetSuite, and we do additional cuts, move some things around, reclass depending on what we're looking at. But to have it all in one place and to be able to kind of keep a pulse throughout the month, how things are looking, is something spiking that we wouldn't expect. We're dealing with primarily international vendors, so there will be supply constraints. There will also be transit times that, are typically 4 to 6 weeks, but can get even longer with things like the Baltimore Bridge collapse. So, being able to have those analytics and those costs really right in front of us in NetSuite has been really helpful.
That's great. Unified system really helps with all that, huh? All in one place. Yeah, definitely.
And with the significant transitions, noting the international expansion, maybe from just stocking more products, expanding across regions and facilities, anything else you'd like to share on just how NetSuite has facilitated these expansions, especially in terms of utilizing features like MRP?
Yeah, so MRP is something that we're growing into. As I've mentioned a few times, our business is mostly custom at this point, but we are kind of expanding into more stocked, standard stocked products and, what that looks like for Essex. So MRP, as well as additional inventory reporting that comes out of NetSuite, is really integral to us planning for, that transition and that new sales channel. In terms of our expansion, so we went live in January of 2023. Right around the same time, we opened our offsite warehouse, which was really the first time that Essex expanded outside of one building for operating, our activities. So with that offsite warehouse, we now have to have transfer orders between our two facilities. They're only about 20 minutes apart, which helps. But we're transferring inventory between the two places. We have some items that are only ever in one, but we have a lot that transfer between the two and could have inventory in either warehouse. So that transition to NetSuite allowed us to use multi-location inventory, and our integration with RF Smart has been really integral in keeping the inventory in real time accurate in terms of moving between bins, moving between warehouses, knowing what's on a truck right now between our warehouses, what's staged at either one to get on the next truck. And RF Smart just across the board has been really great in terms of how seamlessly it integrates with NetSuite, how available the interface is both on a computer or on a scanning gun, and then how well and how quickly those transactions post to NetSuite for anyone, anywhere logged into our NetSuite account to see where our inventory is.
Well, Grace, I have to say this was probably the most eloquent pitch on NetSuite and the feature set I've ever heard. So
No doubt.
anybody from NetSuite is listening, I think they'll be calling you to do one of the customer testimonial videos. But I want to thank you for your valuable insights. Give you kind of the floor and anything you'd like to add, anything from what you have learned, what you're excited about as it relates to NetSuite third-party applications, where maybe Essex is going in the near term.
Yeah, I mean, some of the things we've been focusing on now after we hit that 1 year post go live, now we have a ton of historical data. We can start looking at year-over-year trends all right out of NetSuite. We imported historical data, trial balances, things like that, but detailed sales data by color, by spec, some things I've mentioned. Now having that for over a year has been really great, and we're really excited to harness the potential of that data and the trends that it can show us. Also recently, at the end of last year, we started working with Summit IT, who's a subsidiary of RF Smart, and they were really helpful in helping us revamp our work order traveler. And now it's a really dynamic form that we can constantly move data elements around on. They also helped us revamp our label printing system, which has been really great because previously we were using an independent label printer that operated off a static database. So we would have to update the database that it operated off of if we ever had new items or new criteria for what was on the labels. So once again, Summit IT brings that into NetSuite. So now the travelers and the labels can both be off of the dynamic data that's in our NetSuite system, which has been really helpful. So those were two big goals for us in 2024, to harness that data as well as to streamline and bring even more into our NetSuite system. We've gotten a great start and we're excited for what's to come. We're continuing to grow kind of across, the US in terms of sales channels, continuing to work with our international vendors. And like I said, like the Baltimore Bridge, there's almost always some kind of conundrum that causes, some difference in transit time or in price or freight, whatever that looks like. So we're continuing to tackle these issues as they come up. But as always, NetSuite's been super helpful in giving us the insights behind the impacts that some of these things can have.
Thank you again, and we look forward to more enlightening conversations and discussions with the Essex team, and we really appreciate your time today. As far as Nuage, we specialize in guiding businesses through implementation and optimization of NetSuite. So just bear in mind, you don't have to do it alone. I want to thank you again for tuning in. Join us next time as we continue unraveling the journeys and wisdom of exceptional business leaders. Thank you, Grace. We really appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Grace. Appreciate it.